Welcome to your home tutorials, and you're watching SQL for Beginners tutorial. In this chapter we will learn about constraints. So what are constraints? Constraints are the rules that limit a type of data that can go into a column, into that column in which we specify the constraints. These are the rules. Supposedly we want some range of data to be entered in a column, in a particular column, so we apply some constraints. We have following constraints available in SQL. First is not null. Not null constraint doesn't allow any null value in a column. So what is a null value? Null value is means nothing. It literally means nothing. There is a meaning of a blank value and zero value in a SQL databases, but not null means nothing. So if we don't have any value in a column, we say we have a null value in it. So supposedly we don't want a null value in some of my columns, so I can use not null constraint. So maybe employee name can be one of the field where we don't want any null values, because we want to have a value in an employee name, so we can put not null constraints in that field. Another one is unique key constraint. Unique key constraint, as a name specified, the value must be unique. So if the column is specified as a unique key, then the value in that column will be unique. We don't have any duplicate values in that. Now according to ANSA standard, we can not have any duplicate values into it, but we can have multiple null values into it. However, in SQL Server there is an exception where we cannot use more than one null value. So we can say that Microsoft SQL Server is not working according to the standard, but yes, if we use Oracle, we can use multiple unique values, multiple null values into this column, where we can specify a unique key constraint. The very important constraint is primary key constraint. Primary key constraint can identify a whole record in a table. Primary key is a combination of a unique key and a not null constraint. So a primary key must be unique and should not have any null value in it, because we want to identify a record using this key. So let's say we have employee ID. So employee ID can identify a whole record in for a particular employee, so we can use employee ID as a primary key. Another one important key is foreign key. Foreign key is a key in one table which refers to a primary key of another table. Supposedly we have two tables, A and B, and B is a child table of A, where one column is being referred by another table in table A, which is a primary key of table A. So so it plays an important role in a relational database model. It creates a relation between two tables. One will be a parent table, another will be a child table. Child table will having a foreign key which is being referred by a primary key of another table. Check constraint. Check constraint limit the data. Supposedly we want some range, a particular range that should be entered into a column, so we can use check constraint. We can make some rules of data entry. Supposedly we want some data, some value greater than some value, or we want a range. Supposedly we don't want an employee whose age is less than 18 to be entered, so we can use check constraint there. Another one is default constraint. Default constraint defaults the value into a column. Supposedly we don't want a location to be null, or we don't always want a location to be changed. We can use a default, maybe Chandigarh location, until and unless we specify some other value into this column, the value will be stored as Chandigarh. So this gives us concept of keys as well. We just talked about constraints. Now there are few keys, that is candidate keys, unique keys, primary key, composite key, alternate key, and foreign key. We just in earlier slide we just learned about unique key, primary key, and foreign key. So let me talk about a candidate key, composite key, and alternate key. So what is a candidate key? When we create a table, we might have multiple columns which can become a primary key. So all the columns that can become a primary key can be referred to as a candidate keys. So we have multiple keys which are ready to become a primary key. Those are known as candidate keys. What is a composite key? Supposedly, not a single field is not able to identify a complete record in a table, and doesn't comes under the doesn't specify the rules of primary key, doesn't fit into the rules of primary key. So we might have multiple columns to be our primary key. If we have more than one primary key in a table, means if we have a combination of columns which makes a primary key, that is known as a composite key. Alternate key. Now once we have decided a primary key out of the number of candidate keys, so the left keys, the keys which are not used as primary key, are known as alternate keys. So let us understand this concept diagrammatically. Supposedly we have two tables, one is department table, another one is employee table. So when we create a table, employee table, we will be having candidate keys and candidate keys. In my employee table, I will say that both employee ID and phone number will be unique, so they both can become a primary key. So I will say that employee ID and phone number both are my candidate keys because they can become my primary key. I have not decided yet what will be my primary key. Now an employee can change his phone number anytime, so it is not it is not wise to use phone number as a primary key because it can be changed anytime. So we don't want to use phone number as primary key, so we decide that our employee ID in employee table is a primary key. If we talk about department table, then my department ID will be my primary key because it cannot have null value and it cannot have duplicate values. So my primary key will be department ID from department table and employee ID from employee table. Now unique key. Now we know that phone number will be unique. No two person can have a duplicate phone number, so this field should be unique. Moreover, we can have some people which don't use a phone, so we also want it as null, so we cannot specify it as primary key, so my unique key will be phone number here. Now as we have decided a primary key out of the two fields, that is employee ID and phone number, my two candidate keys, employee ID and phone number, I've used employee ID as my primary key. So the left one, that is left candidate key, which that is phone number, will be my alternate key. Now foreign key. In my employee table, I have a department ID field which is being referred by the department ID field of department table. So department ID in my employee table is a foreign key to department ID in my department table. So I cannot use, so I have values 1, 2, 3 in department ID in department table, so I cannot use value 4 in my employee table because I need to have use only those values which are available in my primary key table, in my parent table. So child can use only those values which are available in my primary table. Yes, we can use null in my foreign key. Supposedly I have a new employee and I have not decided a department for that employee, so I can, for the time being, I can use null value in department ID in my employee table. So this is a concept of keys and constraints in SQL. This allows me to redefine the syntax of create table when we are using some constraints. So my new syntax will be create table, table name, field 1, data type, and constraint, and so on up to the field we want. So supposedly when I'm creating department table, it will be like create table department dept underscore id varchar 10 primary key comma dep name and varchar 50 and not null constraint, because I don't want it to be null, so I'll use not null, and that's it. So this is how I can create a table using constraints. So now let us understand this concept in SQL Server Management Studio. So we are here in my SQL Server Management Studio, and we will learn how to create a table with constraints. I will take example with 3 tables to understand the concept of primary key and foreign key and composite key. So I have a database employee. I will create table 3 tables in this database. So I'll click on new query, make sure that employee is here, or I can alternatively I can use this command, use employee, and then create table. I'm creating a table department here, so create table department parenthesis start, and the first field I'll say dept underscore id department id varchar I'll take 10, and then this will be my primary key. So this is the simplest way to create a primary key. And then I'll have another one. I'm not specifying not null explicitly here because by default primary key will not allow any null value, so I'm not using not null constraint here. But now in department name I will say it dept underscore name, I'll give it n varchar 50 maybe, and not null, because I don't want any null value to be entered in department name. Department should have some name. I'm not allowing it with a null in values in there, so this is a not null constraint I'm using. So I just click on F5 or execute. Commands completed successfully. So let's see if I have a table. I'll just click on table and refresh button. Yes, I have. Now in GUI we can check the columns like this, or we can see I have a primary key here. We can check keys from this as well. So I have a primary key, and a name which is not null. We can open it in design phase, like right click on the table, click on design, and we can see the table details. So I don't have any nulls allowed. I cannot allow nulls in this because this is my primary key. If I click on this, I will have a message: allow nulls property cannot be set on a column which is part of a primary key. So okay, if you want to use Transact-Sql, I have a stored procedure name sp underscore help, and the table name, that is employee, that is department. I'll highlight this and execute this using F5, and here are the details of the table: when the creation date of the table, the column names, how much value, what type, and all the things like that, the index name, the constraint. We have a primary key constraint, not null. So this is how we can check the details of the table in Microsoft SQL Server. In Oracle we can use DSE table and department, but it will not work here. So excuse me, said that I will use another one. I will create another one table. So create table employee, and here are my fields. I will say emp underscore id varchar I'll say 10, and this will be my primary key. Then then name, where and where I'll say 50, and not null. Then I have phone number, and where I'll say 13, and I'll say this will be my unique column, so unique constraint. Then I have say address. I'll leave it as it is. It will be nvar say 100 and nothing. I don't want any constraint in this field. Then we can have age, and we can say age integer with constraint check. I want that age should be either greater than or equal to 18, and it should be less than or equal to 58. So now we cannot enter 17, anything below 18, and above 58 in this column. Now let's say date of joining. Date of joining, it will be date, and I want to default if I don't use any value in it. So what will be the default value? I will say default get date. Get date is a function which will returns me a current date of the system. If I want to use Oracle, then I can always use sysdate. This sysdate will work with Oracle, and get date works with Microsoft SQL Server. So this is get date. I'm defaulting the value to get date, and if we explicit another value, that will be inserted into it. And then I have say department ID, and department ID will be my foreign key. So we have to make sure that the data type matches and the name matches with the one of the primary key in another table. So this is department ID where char 10, and as this is a foreign key, so I'll say foreign key or references department table and department underscore ID field. So this is how we create an employee table, a table with foreign key. So now I will be having a relationship between employee table and department table with this foreign key with the field department ID. So I just highlight this and execute this one, and that's it. Commands completed successfully. Let's check if the table is created. Yes, it is. And if I open it and see the keys, so I have 3 keys, namely primary key, foreign key, and unique key. If I double click on primary key and check the tables, the foreign key base table is employee, the foreign key column is department ID, primary key table is department, and primary is department ID. So in this case I will say that employee is a child table to department table. So let's create another table, skills table, and here we will create composite key. And what is a composite key? Composite key is a primary key when we have when more than one column act as a primary key, then it is known as composite key. So create table, I'll say emp skills parenthesis start, and then I will have skill underscore ID and where char I'll say, and 10. I'll leave it as it is. I'll say emp underscore ID char 10 comma, and I'll say skill underscore name and where char I'll say 50 and not null. So now why I'm using multiple keys here as a primary key, because uh, multiple employees can have a single employee can have multiple skill IDs. So a single key is not qualifying here in my case for to become a primary key. So the idea is that the combination will always be unique. So employee ID 1 will have skill ID 2, employee ID 1 will have skill ID 3, but employee ID cannot have one skill ID two times in this database. So how to create the constraint in this case? I will say constraint, after that comma I'll just put comma and say constraint, gives the constraint name, and I'll give it pk for primary key underscore, I say skills, and primary key, the constraint type, the primary key, and what is my primary key? It is skill underscore id and emp underscore id. So it is a combination of skill id and emp id. Another constraint is foreign key underscore, I'll say skills underscore emp id. So in this case emp id is a part of a primary key as well as a foreign key to employee table. So in this case emp skills will be the child table to employee. So I'll say this, and foreign key, the type of constraint, and what will be my foreign key? It will be emp underscore id of emp skills table, which references to, please check the spelling, refrences, references to employee table, and field is emp underscore id. So yes, I'll highlight this and click on execute, and command completed successfully. So let's check this table as well. Let's go help and emp skills. So I'll just drag it a bit and let's check. So we have three columns in this, and I have constraint type foreign key for the name of the constraint, and what is the field. Constraint keys is emp id. For primary key I have skill id and emp id as my constraint keys. So these two make it one, a primary key. So this is collectively known as composite key. Let me just refresh it and we'll check keys out here as well. So I have this primary key and fk skills emp id. If I open it in design mode, so see I have two primary keys now, skill id and emp id. So this is how we can create constraints in the database tables, and this is how we can imply some rules that what data we can enter into it and one data we cannot enter into the database. So yes, we can do it using GUIs as well. So if I'll create a sample table how we can create a table with primary key. I'm just putting it id, okay, and where char 50, let's say name and something, and say emp id if I want to make it a child table, and I will say where char 10, and this will be my primary key. And if I want a relationship, I will either I go to indexes at keys, or alternatively I can go to relationships, add foreign key and just put the primary key in the table 1. I'll say employee, I'll say, and here will be emp id, here will be emp id as well. So this is a primary key table, this is a foreign key table. I can give a relationship name. So this is done, and this is how we can create a primary key here. I'll save this. I'll save this table_1. Yes, I'll refresh it. So I have a table with keys, foreign key and primary key. So this is how we can create a table using GUI with constraints. Again, GUI is easy, but yes, if you want to make life easier for multiple tables, then we should know Transact-Sql. I hope you understood the concept of how to add the constraints in a table, how to create a table with constraints. If you like this video, please click on like button, and for future videos, for further videos in this tutorial, please click on subscribe, and thank you very much for watching this video.